everyone, we are back with another Nancy Drew no spoiler review. I have the next 5 books in the series that I will be reviewing for you today. We are going to be covering books 6 through 10. So of the books in this review that we're going to be covering, number 6 is The Secret at Red Gate Farm. Number 7 is The Clue in the Diary. Number 8 is Nancy's Mysterious Letter. Number 9 is The Sign of the Twisted Candles. And finally, book number 10, Password to Larkspur Lane. So as always, I will be giving quick little no spoiler synopsises of the books. I will tell you how I rated the book and what I overall thought of the book, whether I liked it or didn't, or anything about it that I want to share. So starting off with book number 6, The Secret of Red Gate Farm. This one was published in 1931 and the revised story was published in 1961. So as far as the synopsis for this one, Nancy, Bess, and George are out shopping, and Bess buys an exotic perfume from a French-Chinese saleswoman who is a little bit reluctant to sell her this exotic perfume. However, she does give in, and Bess buys this perfume, and she is absolutely in love with it, and it causes some problems down the line. So while the girls are on a train back to River Heights, they meet a girl on the train named Joanne who is sickly, and she actually passes out on the train, and the girls help her to try to get to feeling better, and they talk to her and learn that she is looking for work to help her grandmother make ends meet at their family farm called Red Gate Farm. And Joanne's trying to get a job so that they do not have to sell their beloved family farm. So Nancy teams up with Joanne to help her try to find work, and they find themselves in some shady predicaments with a businessman who isn't quite who he seems. So in order to try to help Joanne and her grandmother out, Nancy, Bess, and George decide to stay as tenants at the Red Gate Farm and pay rent to them to kind of help them make ends meet. And simultaneously, Nancy discovers another case that she is working on related to the farm. And it has to do with a strange nature cult that is renting the nearby land around the farm, and they are called Black Snake Colony. And in this mystery, Nancy investigates secret codes, exotic perfumes, bizarre cults, undercover disguises, and Nancy is actually under suspicion by FBI agents for passing counterfeit bills. So as far as the rating I gave this book, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I have to say, based on the title, I was not quite sure what the story was going to be like, and the cover art is, you know, a little bit mysterious. You've got Nancy peeking around a tree, and there is a cloaked figure walking off. So I really didn't know what to expect from this book, and I have to say, from the very beginning, I was totally intrigued with the perfume kind of plot line of it. I don't know why, I love perfume, so I was just immediately kind of intrigued by that and was wondering, how does this perfume tie into things? So that was the first thing that really got me hooked onto this book, and like I said, I just didn't think that this was going to be one just based on the cover art that I really thought I'd like, but I was completely surprised with how the story went and all of the plot lines that go on. I was very pleasantly surprised, and I could not put this book down. This was definitely one of my favorite reads. This one was just definitely a page turner for me. It definitely had me hooked. I finished this one very quickly, and this was just an overall a good read. I would totally recommend this one, and don't let the cover or the name of it kind of make you think it's going to be about something else, because it kind of went like a little more deeper than I really kind of thought the story would go. So this one was actually a really interesting one. All right, next up we have book number 7. This one is called The Clue in the Diary. This one was published in 1932, and the revised story was published in 1962. So some of these editions that I have actually have their own little synopsis in the book, so I am going to read their version. Not all of the editions that I have these little synopsis in here, but when they do, I'm gonna read their synopsis just so I'm not giving away anything extra. So this one says, Nancy and her friends George and Bess are returning from a country carnival when they witness the explosion and burning of a beautiful country mansion. Fearing its occupants may be trapped in the blazing building, they rush to the rescue and unexpectedly find themselves confronted with a mystery that seems to be insoluble. The first clue is an anonymous diary, its entries in handwriting difficult to decipher. Even more puzzling are the technical drawings and chemical formulas contained in its pages. Who dropped the diary near the burning house? Was it a gaunt stranger Nancy glimpsed running away from the flaming structure? What was he doing there? And does he know the whereabouts of Felix Raybolt, an unscrupulous dealer in patents who has not been seen since his home burned down? Or did Rabel die in the fire? Fire investigations believe that the destructive explosion and fire may not have been an accident, but an act of revenge. Evidence mounts against Jo Swenson, an inventor who was swindled by Foxy Felix. Prompted by her affection for Miss Swenson's 5-year-old daughter, Honey, the young detective makes a desperate effort to exonerate the inventor of the suspicion of arson. How she accomplishes this makes another exciting Nancy Drew mystery. I have to say, their summaries are way better than mine, so anytime I have a book that does include a summary, I will be using theirs. Okay, so on to my thoughts of this one, you guys. I am so sorry, but this book bored me to tears. I gave this book 1 out of 5 stars. I don't know what it was. I was just not interested in the storyline of it. I was kind of, the first chapter was really excited about it, but for me, this one just did not hold my interest, and I'm not gonna lie, I really just kind of like had to get through this book because I was not looking forward to reading it. Every time I would read, I was just like, oh, let's kind of get through this, let's hurry it on. I just wasn't interested in this mystery at all, and I don't know what it is, but I just wasn't interested. So unfortunately, I think to date, this has to be my least favorite Nancy Drew book I have read so far. And I'm not trying to be harsh, but I don't know. The story just wasn't it for me. But one note I did want to mention about this book is it is actually the very first official introduction of the character Ned Nickerson. If you are familiar with the Nancy Drew series, he is Nancy's longtime boyfriend, so it was interesting to see him be introduced into this book officially, and I thought it was kind of cute how Nancy and Ned met, and you can just tell like Ned is just smitten with Nancy right away. So I thought that was the one redeeming thing that I really thought was cute about this, but overall this book it kind of bored me to tears, so sorry to say this was not my favorite, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out here that really did like this book, so to each their own. Okay, next up we have a book number 8. This one's called Nancy's Mysterious Letter. Now I did read some of these books out of order, so I didn't read these all chronologically. So this was one I read probably about a month or 2 ago. And this one was originally published in 1932 and the revised story was written in 1968. So this one does not have a summary, so you're gonna have to deal with my own summaries. So for this one, in the late autumn after returning from Redgate Farm, Nancy and her friends enjoy cocoa and a snack at tea time. Meanwhile, postman Ira Nixon is nearing retirement and he is going on his last kind of postal run before he retires. And since it was kind of unseasonably cold, Nancy invited Ira into her house and invites him to have hot cocoa with him. So meanwhile, he leaves his mailbag outside the front porch of Nancy's house and it is stolen. And Nancy is actually blamed for this, for inviting a postman into her house while he's on duty, and she is in big trouble with the Postal Investigation Service. So among all of the letters that were stolen from Ira's postal bag includes a letter that was addressed to Nancy Smith Drew. Now, this is not Nancy Drew that we know, it is a different Nancy Drew, and Nancy becomes involved in this mystery trying to track down who this Nancy Smith Drew is. And with Nancy's father's help, she is able to deduct that the letter has to do with the Nancy Smith Drew receiving a large inheritance back in England. So Nancy is determined to help find the other Nancy Drew to let her know about her inheritance that's waiting for her. So as Nancy is trying to solve this mystery, she ends up going on a few trips, one to Emerson College where her boyfriend Ned Nickerson is a student and he is a star football player, and there Nancy attends the big football game. There is a dance and celebration of all of that she attends, where more danger comes her way, including a chloroform attack, mail fraud, stolen money, and other fraudulent activities involving a Lonely Hearts mailing scheme. So as far as this book, I gave this one a rating of 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't my favorite, but definitely not my least favorite either. It was definitely just like a middle of the road kind of Nancy Drew story for me. I definitely felt this one was a little heavy-handed on coincidence, which is always the case with Nancy Drew mysteries, but this one just felt a little extra too coincidental in my opinion. I did like the story, but I didn't like that they reused the mail fraud kind of plot line, because that was also an element in the previous book, The Clue in the Diary. And although I did not read those consecutively, I, noticed that there was that same kind of plot, and they did do those back to back in those chronological books. So I don't know, I just felt like they kind of overdid that plot line a little bit. I did feel like the ending was a little bit rushed on this one, and I felt like the pacing was a little bit off with Nancy going, place to place to kind of investigate things. And I just felt like the overall theme of it just seemed a little bit naive. I know I'm trying to speak in vague terms as to not spoil anything. And I just felt like overall it was just a little bit too coincidental and unrealistic for my opinion, but overall I thought it was a decent book and just not my favorite, but definitely not the worst either. Next we have book number 9. This one is The Sign of the Twisted Candles. This is the most recent book. I literally just finished it this morning, and I did read this one out of order, and this one does have a little synopsis here, so I will be reading theirs. So this one states, another exciting mystery begins for the attractive young detective when her friends Bess and George ask her to investigate a rumor about their wealthy great-grand-uncle, Asa Sidney, who is virtually a prisoner in his own mansion. But solving the mystery and befriending Carol Whipple, the 16-year-old foster daughter of the caretakers of the old mansion, nearly cost Nancy the friendship of Bess and George. It takes all of Nancy's sleuthing ability as well as diplomacy to save it. At the same time, Nancy braves one danger after another to bring to justice the swindlers who are stealing Asa Sidney's fortune. With only the sign of the twisted candles to guide her, Nancy uncovers hidden treasure and an amazing letter that ends a family feud and brings unexpected happiness to Carol. So my rating for this book, I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. This was one I just like really couldn't put down, and I really looked forward to every time I was going to sit down and read. I wanted to like just read the whole book in one sitting. This one just really had me interested from the beginning, and I really liked the intrapersonal like conflict between Bess and George and Nancy, because it just kind of showed like a realistic human side of them, you know, having a kind of a big tiff, and whether Nancy and George and Bess were gonna make up or not. I mean, obviously we know they're gonna make up in the end, but it was nice to kind of see like a real human side of them and kind of see what was going to happen. Another thing, this might be a tiny bit of a spoiler, so if you do not want any type of spoilers at all, definitely skip. I will have a little timestamp where you can skip to. But in this Nancy Drew book, this is the first one that they really directly deal with a death of a character, which I thought was kind of interesting because up until now there hadn't been any actual deaths in the books, so I thought that was an interesting kind of side plot that really changes the entire course of the story. So overall, I really enjoyed this one. I thought this was a really good one, and definitely one of my more favorite books that I have read in the Nancy Drew series. It was just a really good one. And finally, the last book for this review video. This one is number 10. This one's called Password to Larkspur Lane. This one was published in 1933, and the revised story was published in 1966. So the story opens up with Nancy tending her prize delphiniums, which are flowers, and meanwhile, a mysterious carrier pigeon falls out of the sky and lands in Nancy's yard. Meanwhile, Nancy's housekeeper, Hannah Gruen, is injured after a fall, and she must be treated at the local orthopedic doctor's office. And while they are there, they hear of a mysterious story that the doctor tells them about how he was forced to take care of this woman under very peculiar circumstances, including blindfolding the doctor and taking him to an undisclosed location and forcing him to treat this elderly woman who he fears that she may be a prisoner. So in this mystery, Nancy is confronted with threats of danger, enigmatic code words, ghostly blue lights in the woods, and a captive patience of an insane asylum. I gave this one another 5 out of 5 stars. This was just a little bit more of like a deeper, kind of darker story than what I would typically think of from like a Nancy Drew story. It definitely had some twist, and there were parts near the end of the book where my heart was actually beating as I was reading the story, kind of wondering, how is Nancy going to get out of this? What is going to happen? This was definitely a very interesting story. I do have to say the beginning felt a little bit slow to me, but from midway to the end, it was strong. I was in it, and I was so interested to see what was going to happen. So that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram. Link is below